It's all good. Yes. But yeah, we're definitely going to get into the whole nobody wants to work anymore myth later on in the show. Hopefully we have enough time. But first and foremost, doing this show, it's hard to narrow down which news stories are important enough to address each week. And sometimes there's news stories that end up falling through the cracks because something happened. Like just today, like I just said a few hours ago, Jim Brown died. Now, this is one of the great civil rights activists, athletes of all time. And it just sort of happened after I'd already sort of prepared a show for today. So that always happens. And sometimes stories fall through the cracks. And over the last few weeks, some really big stories have fallen through the cracks. I think not only in my show, but in the media. And I just wanted to address that. This is the news behind the news with Scott Cannon here on WLTH 1370 AM. The news behind the news you can use. Yes, this is the stuff that I think is a little bit flying under the radar. That I feel like the mainstream media is not covering enough, and I may have missed. First and foremost, the FBI and the media framed Donald Trump and the Clinton campaign. I think that's a story that has sort of fallen under the radar for obvious reasons. Now, I've told you guys for 6 years, 7 years since I've been here that Russiagate was a fraud. I could see it back in 2015, 2016. I argued with people on LTH about it ad nauseum back when I was on Monday with Jonathan. Me and him both saw that it was nonsense pretty early on in the game. And now you see people like the African Socialist People's Party. They're being persecuted supposedly for distributing Russian propaganda. And really the whole means of this was about pushing the idea that any pushback against Western imperialism, particularly American imperialism, any anti-war values are anti-American and pro-Russia. And so obviously, as somebody on the left, I was always very sensitive about this because this is how they've always characterized anti-imperialist, anti-war thought. This is why they said Martin Luther King was a communist. This is why a few weeks ago I played Scandalize My Name, a lot of the excerpt from that movie, that documentary, about all those great black activists and artists who had their lives and careers destroyed by the idea that they were Russian puppets. So anyway, now Russiagate has finally officially fallen apart. And even CNN, who helped perpetuate it, have had to admit that it is nonsense after the Durham report has come out, which was the investigation into the whole Russiagate phenomenon. This is Jake Tapper from CNN talking about the Durham report.
Report is now here. It has dropped, and it might not have produced everything of what some Republicans hoped for. It is, regardless, devastating to the FBI, and to a degree, it does exonerate Donald Trump. Let's bring in CNN senior justice correspondent Evan Perez. Evan, what exactly did Durham find in this report?
Well, Jake, the bottom line finding from John Durham's 4-year investigation is that the FBI moved very quickly to investigate these allegations of connections, of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. and that they did so by ignoring a lot of evidence that would have led them to drop that altogether. He's saying that they may have had reason to open a preliminary investigation, an assessment. Perhaps these are very, very low-level investigations. But certainly what he finds is that there wasn't enough there to support the FBI's decision to open a full-blown investigation of this of the Trump-Russia ties back in 2016. I'll tell you one part of what he writes here. He says that it seems highly likely that at a minimum, confirmation bias played a significant role in the FBI's acceptance of extraordinarily serious allegations derived from uncorroborated information that had not been subjected to the typical exacting analysis that the FBI usually uses. He goes on to say that the FBI discounted or willfully ignored material information that did not support the narrative of a collusive relationship between Trump and Russia. There's a lot of very sharp criticism here of the former FBI leadership, James Comey, Andy McCabe, who were running the FBI and who oversaw a lot of these, a lot of the steps that the report goes into, Jake. But as you pointed out, bottom line, there are no additional charges. Nobody is bringing charges against Comey or anybody else that the former President Trump kept saying he expected them to. There was a former Clinton campaign outside lawyer who was brought up on charges. He was acquitted. Again, in here, there's a footnote that points out there's no chargeable crimes against people in the Clinton campaign. Again, something that the former president said he expected this investigation to find, Jake.
So it's very interesting. First of all, we should note that when President Biden took office, there were two special counsels, or one U.S. attorney and one special counsel, that he let continue doing their jobs. One was John Durham, right, doing this case, and the other one was the U.S. attorney in Delaware investigating Hunter. So that is why this was allowed to proceed. A couple quotes here from Durham's report. One, based on the review of Crossfire Hurricane, that's the investigation into Trump and Russia, and related intelligence activities, we conclude that the Justice Department and FBI failed to uphold their important mission of strict fidelity to the law in connection with certain events and activities described in the report. And he says about, quote, regarding certain personnel intimately involved in the matter, there was a, quote, predisposition to open an investigation into Trump. He is basically saying, he's not, these are not criminal allegations, but he's saying that this was unprofessional and failed to meet the standards of the Justice Department and the FBI.
Wow. That's just brutal right there. And so what was the point of all this? The whole point of all this is what we're doing now. A proxy war in Ukraine. This is what these psychos who run our government have always wanted. They wanted a war with Russia. They wanted Europe to no longer buy Russian oil. They wanted to try to weaken Russia on the geopolitical front. And now everything in America costs a lot more. A lot more. Because of this stupid proxy war that the powers that be that run this country got us into. I mean, look, I just went to the grocery store a few days ago. I tried to buy some hamburger patties. They were $7.99. I used to buy them regularly. They were $7.99. A month ago, they were like $9.99. Guess what they wanted me to pay for them the other day? $12.99. They wanted me to pay $12.99 for something I was buying for $7.99 for years. No, it don't work like that. I'm sorry. I had to get something else. And look, this is the consequences of the war industrial complex. Now, we just saw today, this is another story that probably has gone under the radar, and I really doubt the American media is really talking about 10 Asian and South Pacific countries have agreed to drop the U.S. dollar. 10 countries in Asia. they have agreed to drop the U.S. dollar. The more countries drop the U.S. dollar, the more we're going to be paying for things. Because the less the U.S. dollar will be worth and will be valued. All this proxy war in Ukraine has done is make a lot more difficult situations for the average American person. And this is why you always have to be skeptical of what the corporate media is selling you. They sold you Russiagate for 5 or 6 years. One, to try to vilify Russia so they could justify the ballooning military budgets that they would need to fight Russia. And now we're in Ukraine. Also to silence dissent from people on the left. Actual left, not liberals. As Malcolm X told you in the intro, those people are not the left. Those people are frauds. Especially the black people. They are frauds. 100%. And they wanted to stop dissent. So now African socialists, all socialists, communists, populists like myself, all of us, we have to worry about the CIA, the FBI, whoever, wanting to spy on us because we had to do whatever it takes to stop Russian propaganda. This is what they did back in the 50s and 60s. This is what they did to Paul Robeson. This is what they did to Harry Belafonte, rest in peace, who just passed away a few weeks ago. History does not repeat itself, folks, but it rhymes. Yes, it does. Okay, so that was the first story that I feel like went under the radar, considering this, it probably should be the biggest political scandal in modern history. The media and FBI and a political party trying to essentially steal an election. But also, they weren't done, folks. Yes. So if they weren't done trying to rig the 2016 election, they certainly weren't done by 2020. Because now, again, this stuff always comes out at the end, after it's too late to do virtually anything about it. The head of the FBI in this country has admitted to conspiring to cover up Hunter Biden's laptop, the story about Hunter Biden's laptop. Former acting director Mike Morrell, who was the head of the CIA, and the Biden campaign, conspired to produce a letter that falsely claimed that the emails from Hunter Biden's laptop were, again, Russian disinformation, and solicited signatures from at least one former intelligence official or staff, reported to the House Judiciary Committee. Morrell told the CIA's pre-publication classification review board that he needed the letter approved as an unusual rush job on that day in October of 2020, in an effort to provide then-candidate Joe Biden ammunition in the final presidential debate to discredit the Post report on Hunter Biden's emails. That day, a CIA employee working for PCRB solicited a signature for Morrell's letter from former CIA analyst David Carlins, according to a written statement by Carlins to the subcommittees on the weaponization of the federal government and intelligence. Carlins explained that he had been speaking with the PCRB about the pre-publication review of his own memoir, and during the phone call, the CIA employee had asked him if he would sign the draft letter. Now, he said, when the person in charge of reviewing my book called to say it was approved with no changes, I was told about the draft letter. The person asked me if I was willing to sign, and I agreed to sign. He then told his wife, also a former CIA officer, about the letter, and she also agreed to sign. Morrell directed the PCRB that this is a rush job as it needs to get out as soon as possible. So you heard all this before the last debates between Biden and Trump, basically, that 50 intelligence officials had all gotten together and said that Hunter Biden's laptop was nonsense. That what you saw in there was Russian disinformation. It was planted, which they knew at the time was false. We knew at the time was false. How did we know? Because Hunter Biden himself didn't deny it. He was asked about it in an interview. Remember? He was asked, "Is this your laptop?" And he went, "Oh, well, you know." Woo! Cat daddy. You know what I'm saying? This man tried to change it. This man changed the subject. So why is it important? Because inside those emails, I mean, the media talked about the more sensationalistic stuff, like pictures of Hunter with prostitutes and smoking crack and things like that. You know, that's salacious. You know what I mean? But you could argue that's personal. But there were also emails to people involved with the Chinese government, the Russian government, Ukrainian governments, people, emails that talked about how Hunter himself was being paid for access to his father while his father was the vice president of the United States. One thing that's never been completely clarified. Who is the big guy? Who? Who is the big guy? 10% for the big guy. Who is this big guy? Could it be his father? The current president of the United States? The guy who, when he was the vice president of the United States, was the point person on Ukraine? A place where Hunter just so happened to have a no-show job on a board of a corrupt energy company that paid him $80,000 a month? Could that be the big guy? But the media did not do their job at all in pursuing the truth on this issue because, again, they felt that it was their job to prevent Trump from winning. And it is not. And it is not their job to prevent Trump from winning. I don't want Trump to win any more than anybody else, but I understand that it is counterproductive what they are doing. If the Democrats really cared about winning and not letting Donald Trump win, in 2016, when Bernie Sanders was by far the more popular candidate and polled much better against Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton did, they would not have rigged the process against him. You know how we know they did it? Because they admitted it. They admitted it in a court of law that they have a right to rig their primaries any way that they want. Because Donna Brazile, the head of the DNC at the time, who was forced to take over the DNC after Debbie Wasserman Schultz was forced to step down due to helping Hillary rig the process, wrote a letter and called Bernie Sanders, apologizing to him for the DNC rigging the process. That's how we know. And Bernie Sanders is a coward for not standing up for himself against the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. And this is why we end up with Trump. That's how you end up with Trump. If the Democrats wanted to actually beat Trump, it would be very easy for them to beat a clownish game show host. Very easy. The public wants Medicare for all. 70%. 50% of Republicans want Medicare for all. Half of Republicans want Medicare for all. Most Americans want a tax on wealth. A wealth tax. That's always polled well. decriminalizing marijuana and what it's done to the prison in terms of expanding the prison industrial complex. That's what the American public wants. Polls show this regularly. But they can't give the American public what we want because it is not what the donors, the Wall Street donors, the defense contractors, Big Pharma, and the drug companies, the health insurance companies, this is not what they want. And these people own us. They own our society. Like George Carlin told you at the beginning of last week's show, they own you. They own everything. It's a big club and you ain't in it. So it's important to always put these things into perspective. Please give me a call, 219-885-1371. That number again, 219-885-1371. My Country with Scott Cannon, Issues and Answers Friday here on WLTH 1370 AM. Please stay with us.